Okay, so today we're diving deep into the life of a true cryptography legend, Hal Finney. When you think about the early days of Bitcoin and you hear that name, Satoshi Nakamoto, well, this is the guy who actually received the very first Bitcoin transaction.
That's right. January 12th, 2009, 10 bitcoins straight from Satoshi to Hal Finney.
Kind of a big deal.
It's a historic moment, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Finney was much more than just the recipient of that first transaction. He was a pioneer in cryptography long before Bitcoin even existed.
Really? Like what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, think about this. Imagine sending an email that's completely unreadable to anyone except the person you sent it to.
Okay, yeah, that's encryption.
Right. And that's exactly what PGP, or pretty good privacy, does. Finney was a core developer of PGP back in the early 90s.
Wow. So he was working on digital privacy back when most people didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, exactly. He was way ahead of his time. He worked alongside Phil Zimmermann, the creator of PGP, and they were really pushing the boundaries of what was possible with encryption.
So this wasn't just some techie who got lucky with Bitcoin. This guy was dedicated to privacy and security long before it was cool.
It was more than just cool for him, though. Finney truly believed in the right to privacy in a digital age. It was a core value that drove his work.
So he's this privacy advocate, cryptography expert, and then Bitcoin comes along in 2008. What was his reaction?
It's funny. Finney was actually one of the first people to respond to the Bitcoin white paper when Satoshi published it. He saw the potential right away.
Really? So he was like, this is it. This is the future.
I think so. He definitely recognized the brilliance of the system. Remember, this was before anyone knew if Bitcoin would actually work. It was all just theory at that point.
And then boom, a few months later, he gets those first 10 Bitcoins from Satoshi. It's
Yeah.
almost like a passing of the torch,
It's definitely symbolic, right? And it shows that he wasn't just a passive observer. He was actively involved in testing the system, providing feedback to Satoshi, probably even contributing to the code itself.
That's amazing. He was right there at the ground floor of this whole revolution. But didn't you say that he was actually kind of hesitant about Bitcoin at first?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Finney was incredibly cautious about new cryptography. He had seen a lot of hyped-up systems fail over the years, so he wasn't quick to jump on any bandwagons.
That makes sense. So what was it about Bitcoin that eventually won him over?
Well, it seems that Bitcoin's resilience is what impressed him. It kept working, it started gaining value, the community around it was growing. And about a year after its launch, you start to see Finney really diving back in, becoming even more enthusiastic than before.
So this guy who was so ahead of his time with PGP also saw the long-term potential of Bitcoin very early on. Amazing. But there's more to his story than just PGP and Bitcoin, isn't there?
There is. Years before Bitcoin even came along, in the early 2000s, Finney had this idea for a system called reusable proof of work, or RPoW for short.
RPW, okay, what's that?
Well, he was already thinking about the issue of energy consumption in proof of work systems, which is something we still talk about a lot with Bitcoin today, right?
Yeah, for sure. So he was trying to make proof of work more efficient, even back then.
Exactly. RPoW built on earlier work by Adam Back, who created Hashcash, but Finney's idea was to allow the computational work done for one purpose to be reused for other purposes. Imagine solving a complex math problem to send a Bitcoin transaction,
Uh-huh.
and then using that same solution to also verify an email or even cast a secure vote online.
Whoa, that's pretty wild.
That was his vision, and it just shows how far ahead of his time he really was.
Wow. He wasn't just creating these systems. He was thinking about how they could all connect and be used for so much more.
Yeah, and he saw the potential for these technologies to have a real impact on people's lives.
Which is incredible. But tragically, his life takes a heartbreaking turn around the same time.
Yeah. In 2009, the same year Bitcoin launched, Finney was diagnosed with ALS.
ALS, so...
amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's a devastating and incurable disease that gradually affects your muscles, making it harder and harder to move and speak.
So at the same time that this revolutionary technology he helped bring into the world was taking off, he's facing this incredibly difficult personal challenge.
It's a cruel twist of fate, isn't it? But here's the thing. Even with this diagnosis, Finney refused to let ALS define him. So, we left off with Hal Finney facing this incredibly difficult ALS diagnosis in 2009.
Right, a devastating disease, especially for someone who clearly loved to code, to think, to be active in the world.
You would think it might slow him down, but it really didn't.
He kept
He
going.
kept going. Even as his physical abilities declined, Finney continued to code to engage in the Bitcoin community. He even developed a Bitcoin wallet. It's remarkable.
That's incredible. It's like his mind just wouldn't quit.
Exactly. And there's actually this bittersweet irony. The Bitcoin he mined early on actually helped his family cover some of his medical expenses.
Wow. So the technology he believed in ended up having a very real impact on his life.
It did. But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about Finney's technical achievements, but what about Finney the person? What was he like outside of the world of cryptography and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. What kind of guy was he?
Well, from what I've read, he was a kind, humble, and incredibly intelligent individual. Those who knew him personally describe him as someone who was always willing to help others, always eager to share his knowledge.
Do we have any insights into his personality from, his online presence? I know he was active in those early Bitcoin forums.
Oh, absolutely. And those early online interactions are really fascinating. You see, Finney wasn't just discussing technical details. He was having these thoughtful conversations about the potential societal impacts of Bitcoin, privacy concerns, the broader implications of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
He even shared personal anecdotes like about how he used Bitcoin to buy a pizza online.
Wait, he actually used Bitcoin to buy a pizza. That's pretty cool.
It is. And it shows that he wasn't just interested in the theory of Bitcoin, he was actually experimenting with its real-world applications.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like back then, to be one of the first people to actually use Bitcoin to buy something. It must have felt revolutionary.
Oh, I'm sure it did. And you can really sense that excitement in Finney's writing from that time.
It's amazing how you can get these glimpses of someone's personality, their hopes, their excitement, even through these online interactions.
You really can. And it's clear that Finney was genuinely excited about the possibilities of this technology, not just from a technical standpoint, but for its potential to change the world.
So we've talked about his early life, his pioneering work in cryptography, his fascination with Bitcoin, his battle with ALS, even his personality in his online interactions. It's been quite a journey, but there's still this one big question looming over everything we've discussed.
Yes. The question that everyone wants an answer to was Hal Finney actually Satoshi Nakamoto?
The mystery of the century. All right, so we're back, and I have to admit, that Satoshi question has been on my mind this whole time.
It's hard to ignore, isn't it? This mystery at the heart of Bitcoin.
It is. But before the break, you said that Finney himself always denied being Satoshi.
Yeah. And a lot of people in the Bitcoin community believe him. They say it just wouldn't fit with his personality, his values.
But there's got to be a reason why this theory keeps coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are people seeing that makes them wonder?
Well, think about it. He received the very first Bitcoin transaction directly from Satoshi.
We talked about that earlier.
Right, but it wasn't just a tiny amount. It was 10 whole Bitcoins.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
I mean, it suggests a level of closeness that goes beyond just, being an early adopter.
So maybe they were working together on it, collaborating somehow?
Possibly. And then there's the whole Dorian Nakamoto thing.
Oh, yeah. Remind me about that.
Well, back in 2014, Newsweek published this big article claiming that they had found Satoshi Nakamoto.
And it turned out to be.
Dorian Nakamoto, this unassuming guy living in California. But he denied it completely.
Right. And everyone basically agreed that Newsweek got it wrong.
Yeah. The Bitcoin community was pretty quick to dismiss it.
But what does that have to do with Hal Finney?
Well, here's the thing. Finney lived just a few blocks away from Dorian Nakamoto.
No way.
Seriously. And that's just fueled all sorts of speculation, Did Satoshi use Dorian's identity as a cover? Was Finney somehow involved?
Wow. That's pretty wild. I mean, I'm not sure I buy it, but it's definitely an interesting coincidence.
It is. And there are other things, too. Some people have analyzed the writing styles of Satoshi and Finney and found some similarities.
Really? Like what?
Things like word choice, sentence structure, even punctuation. It's not a smoking gun, but it's enough to make some people wonder.
Huh. So we've got the first Bitcoin transaction, the proximity to Dorian Nakamoto, the potential writing style similarities. But what about the technical stuff? Would Finney even have had the skills to actually create Bitcoin?
Absolutely. Remember, this is the guy who helped develop PGP encryption, and he was already working on proof-of-work systems before Bitcoin even existed.
So he definitely had the technical chops to pull it off.
No doubt.
Okay, so we've looked at the evidence, and it's definitely intriguing. But the big question remains, was Hal Finney really Satoshi Nakamoto?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, we may never know for sure. Finney took that secret with him.
It's kind of poetic in a way. This anonymous creator giving the world this revolutionary technology and then disappearing. The mystery becomes part of the story.
It does. And even if Finney wasn't Satoshi, his contributions to cryptography and his early involvement with Bitcoin are undeniable. He was a pioneer.
Absolutely. A visionary who saw the potential of this technology long before most people even knew what it was.
And who knows? Maybe he knew more about the origins of Bitcoin than he ever let on.
Something for us to ponder. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from PGP encryption to the early days of Bitcoin to that enduring Satoshi mystery. It's been an incredible journey exploring the life and work of Hal Finney.
He was a true original.
He was. And his story is a reminder that even in the face of incredible challenges, one person can make a real difference in the world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.